Let's build some more of the vocabulary that we're going to use to talk about arguments. An argument consists of known facts and the new facts that we arrive at. In an argument, the known facts are called the premises. And the new fact that we arrive at is called the conclusion. In more complicated arguments, we might have smaller conclusions on the way to a big conclusion. But for the most part in this class, we're just going to analyze relatively short, simple arguments. Now, one of the skills that we need in order to analyze arguments is to identify what are the premises and what are the conclusions. And we use our tools from English to identify those, assuming that we're writing our arguments in English. So let's look at an example of an argument and see if we can identify the premises and the conclusion. So here's a very simple argument. This argument says, Fozzie is a bear. As a rule, bears are not funny. Therefore, Fozzie is not funny. So there are three facts that we're stating in this argument. Fozzie is a bear. That's a fact that this argument is telling us. Bears are not funny. And therefore, Fozzie is not funny. Those are the three facts that this argument is telling us. Now, because we're being presented with this argument, we might not have known anything here. When we analyze it, we need to see which things the person making the argument were assuming were known and what it is they're trying to convince us of. In this argument, we see that the entire point where it's driving toward is the fact that Fozzie is not funny. Now, maybe you can see that just by reading those sentences. If not, in just a moment we'll talk about what verbal cues English is using here to help us see that that's our conclusion. If that's our conclusion, then the other two facts that this argument is stating, Fozzie is a bear, and bears are not funny, those must be the premises. So the person making this argument was thinking, everybody knows that Fozzie's a bear, and everybody knows that bears aren't funny. I can draw on those facts to convince my audience that Fozzie isn't funny. Okay, what is it in this argument that makes us think that Fozzie is not funny is the conclusion? Well, there's a cue word in this argument. It's the word therefore. Therefore is a word that we use in English to cue that we're about to state the conclusion. There are a bunch of other words like that. And some of them might include the word so, the word thus, which is one of those words that you really only use when you're writing an argument in a kind of formal setting. We might even say, we conclude. You might want to pause the video at this point and think about, are there any other words that you can think of that if you were writing an essay, say, you might use to introduce the conclusion? Take a minute and brainstorm some of those words. But also in this argument, we have a phrase that cues us that one of the facts that we're stating is a premise. When we say, as a rule, we are often introducing a general rule that is widely accepted. So if we say, as a rule, we're probably introducing a premise. And in fact, it's a specific kind of premise that we're going to talk a little bit more about in the next video. But so in this argument, the as a rule is a cue that we might be looking at a premise. Some other words that might suggest we're looking at a premise, we might say since, we might say we know, to indicate that we're talking about a known fact. We might say because. Whatever it's because of is probably a premise. If we're being very formal, we might say given. Given that such and such, we conclude conclusion. Again, think about what you might write in an essay to let the audience know that you are introducing a fact that they probably are already aware of, or if they're not aware of it, they could Google it. Those are the kind of things that are premises. So again, after the end of the video, take a moment to brainstorm those kinds of words as well.